Chapter 6, Dinosaur Valley. Annie, look at this, Jack called. Look what I found. Annie had gone up to the hilltop. She was picking a flower from the magnolia tree. Annie, look, a medallion, shouted Jack. But Annie wasn't paying attention to Jack. She was staring at something on the other side of the hill. Oh, wow, she said. Clutching her magnolia flower, she took off down the hill. Annie, come back, Jack shouted, but Annie had disappeared. Oh, brother, Jack muttered. He stuffed the gold medallion into his jeans pocket. Then Jack heard Annie shriek. Annie, he said. Jack heard another sound as well, a deep bellowing sound, like a tuba. Jack, come here, quick, Annie called. Jack raced up the hill. When he got to the top, he gasped. The valley below was filled with nests, big nests made out of mud. The nests were filled with tiny dinosaurs. Annie was crouching next to one of the nests. Towering over her was a gigantic duck-billed dinosaur. Don't panic. Don't move, said Jack. He stepped slowly down the hill toward Annie. The huge dinosaur was waving her arms and making her tuba sound. Jack stopped. He didn't want to get too close. He knelt on the ground. Okay, move toward me. Slowly, he said. Annie started to stand up. Don't stand, crawl, said Jack. Clutching her flower, Annie crawled toward Jack. Still bellowing, the duck-billed dinosaur followed her. Annie froze. Keep going, Jack said. Annie started crawling again. Jack inched further down the hill until he was just an arm's length's distance from Annie. He reached out and grabbed her hand. He pulled Annie toward him. Stay down, Jack said. He crouched next to her. Bow your head. Pretend to chew. Chew? Said Annie. Yes, said Jack. I read that's what you do if a mean dog comes at you. She's no dog, Jack, said Annie. Just chew, said Jack. Jack and Annie both bowed their heads and pretended to chew. Soon the dinosaur grew quiet. Jack looked up. I don't think she's mad anymore, he said. You saved me, said Annie. Thanks. You have to use your brain, Annie, said Jack. You can't just go running to a nest of babies. There's always a mother nearby. Annie stood up. Annie, don't, said Jack. Too late. Annie held out a magnolia flower for the dinosaur. I'm sorry I made you worry about your babies, she said. The dinosaur moved closer to Annie. Chapter 7. Ready, set, go. Run, Annie, run, cried Jack. Run to the treehouse. Jack and Annie dashed down the hill together. They ran through the tall grass and ferns and past the pteranodon. They scrambled up the rope ladder and tumbled into the treehouse. Annie leapt to the window. It's going away, she said, panting. Jack pushed his glasses into place. He looked out the window with Annie. The Tyrannosaurus was wandering off. But then the monster stopped and turned around. Duck, said Jack. The two of them ducked their heads. After a long moment, they peeked out the window again. Coast clear, said Jack. Yay, whispered Annie. We have to get out of here, said Jack. You made a wish before, said Annie. Right, said Jack. He took a deep breath. I wish we could go back to Frog Creek. Nothing happened. I said I wish, started Jack. Wait, said Annie. You were looking at a picture in the dinosaur book, remember? Oh, no. I left the book and my pack on the hill, said Jack. I have to go back. Forget it, said Annie. I can't, said Jack. The book doesn't belong to us. Plus, my notebook with all my notes is in my pack. And my okay, Annie said. I'll hurry, said Jack. He climbed quickly down the ladder and leapt to the ground. Jack raced past the pteranodon, through the ferns, through the tall grass, and up the hill. He looked down. His pack was lying on the ground. On top of it was the dinosaur book. But now the valley below was filled with anatosauruses. They were all standing guard around the nests. Where had they been? Did fear of the Tyrannosaurus send them home? Jack took a deep breath. Ready, set, go, he thought. He charged down the hill. He ran to his backpack. He scooped it up. He grabbed the dinosaur book. Jack heard a terrible tuba sound, then another and another. All the anatosauruses were bellowing at him. Jack took off. He raced up to the hilltop. He started down the hill. He stopped. The Tyrannosaurus Rex was back. It was standing between Jack and the treehouse. Chapter 8. A Giant Shadow. Jack jumped behind the magnolia tree. His heart was beating so fast he could hardly think. He peeked out at the giant monster. The horrible-looking creature was opening and closing its huge jaws. Its teeth were as big as steak knives. Don't panic, thought Jack. Think. He peered down at the valley. Good. The duck-billed dinosaurs were sticking close to their nests. Jack looked back at the Tyrannosaurus. Good. The monster still didn't seem to know he was there. Don't panic. Think. Think. Maybe there's information in the book. Jack opened the dinosaur book. He found Tyrannosaurus Rex. He read, Tyrannosaurus Rex was one of the largest meat-eating land animals of all time. If it were alive today, it could eat a human in one bite. Great, thought Jack. The book was no help at all. Jack tried to think clearly. He couldn't hide on the other side of the hill. The anatosauruses might stampede. He couldn't run to the treehouse. The Tyrannosaurus might run faster. Maybe he should just wait for the monster to leave. Jack peeked around the tree. The Tyrannosaurus had wandered closer to the hill. Something caught Jack's eye. Annie was climbing down the rope ladder. Is she nuts? What is she doing? Jack wondered. Jack watched Annie hop off the ladder. Annie hurried over to the pteranodon. She was talking to him. She was flapping her arms. She pointed at Jack, at the sky, at the treehouse. She is nuts, Jack thought. Go back up in the treehouse, Jack whispered. Go. Jack heard a roar. The Tyrannosaurus was looking in his direction. Jack hit the ground. The Tyrannosaurus Rex was coming toward the hill. Jack felt the ground shaking. What should I do? He wondered. Should I run? Crawl back into Dinosaur Valley? Climb the magnolia tree? Suddenly, a giant shadow covered Jack. He looked up. The pteranodon was gliding overhead. The giant creature sailed toward the top of the hill. He was heading toward Jack. Chapter 9. The Amazing Ride. The pteranodon coasted down to the ground. He stared at Jack with his bright, alert eyes. What was Jack supposed to do? Climb on? But I'm too heavy, thought Jack. Jack looked at the Tyrannosaurus. It was starting up the hill. Its giant teeth were flashing in the sunlight. Okay, thought Jack, don't think, just do it. Jack put his book in his pack. Then he climbed onto the pteranodon's back. He held on tightly. The creature moved forward. He spread his wings and lifted off the ground. Jack nearly fell off as they teetered this way and that. The pteranodon steadied himself and rose into the sky. Jack looked down. The Tyrannosaurus was staring up at him and chomping the air. The pteranodon glided away. He sailed over the hilltop and over the valley. He circled above all the duck-billed dinosaurs and all the nests filled with babies. Then the pteranodon soared out over the plain, over the Triceratops, who was grazing in the high grass. Jack felt like a bird. The wind was rushing through his hair. The air smelled sweet and fresh. Jack whooped and laughed. He couldn't believe it. He was riding on the back of an ancient flying reptile. The pteranodon sailed over the stream and over the ferns and bushes. Then he carried Jack down to the base of the oak tree. When they came to a stop, Jack slid off the creature's back and landed on the ground. The pteranodon took off again and glided into the sky. "Bye, Henry," called Jack. "Jack, are you okay?" Annie shouted from the treehouse. Jack pushed his glasses into place. He kept staring at the pteranodon. "Jack!" Annie called. Jack looked up at Annie. He smiled. "Thanks for saving my life," he said. "That was really fun." "Thank Henry, not me," Annie said. "Come on, climb up." Jack tried to stand. His legs were wobbly. He felt a bit dizzy. "Hurry!" shouted Annie. "It's coming." Jack looked around. The Tyrannosaurus was heading straight toward him. Jack bolted to the ladder. He started climbing. "Hurry! Hurry!" screamed Annie. Jack reached the top and tumbled into the treehouse. "It's coming toward the tree," Annie cried. The dinosaur slammed against the oak tree. The treehouse shook like a leaf in the wind. Jack and Annie tumbled into the books. "Make a wish to go home," cried Annie. "We need the book, the Pennsylvania book," said Jack. "Where is it?" They both searched madly around the treehouse. "Found it," said Jack. He grabbed the book and flipped through the pages. He found the photograph of the Frog Creek Woods. Jack pointed to the picture in the book. I wish we could go home, he shouted. The wind began to blow. Jack closed his eyes. He held on tightly to Annie. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 10. Home Before Dark. Jack heard a bird singing. He opened his eyes. He was still pointing at the picture of the Frog Creek woods. He peeked out the treehouse window. Outside, he saw the exact same view as the picture in the book. "We're home," whispered Annie. The woods were lit with a golden late afternoon light. The sun was about to set. No time had passed since they'd left Frog Creek. "Jack, Annie," a voice called from the distance. "That's Mom," said Annie. Jack saw their mother far away. She was standing in front of their house. She looked tiny. "Annie, Jack," she called. Annie stuck her head out the window and shouted, "Coming!" Jack still felt dazed. He just stared at Annie. "What happened to us?" he said. "We took a trip in a magic treehouse," said Annie simply. "But it's the same time as when we left," said Jack. Annie shrugged. "How did it take us so far away?" said Jack, "and so long ago?" "You looked at a picture in a book and said you wished to go there. You could go there," said Annie. "And the magic treehouse took us there." "But how?" said Jack. "And who built this magic treehouse? Who put all these books here?" "A magic person, I guess," said Annie. "Oh, look," said Jack. "I almost forgot about this." Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out the gold medallion. "Someone lost this back there," he said, "in Dinosaur Land. Look, there's the letter M on it." Annie's eyes got round. "You think M stands for magic person?" she asked. "I don't know," said Jack. "I just know someone went to that place before us." "Jack, Annie," their mom called again. "Coming," Annie shouted again. Jack put the medallion back in his pocket. He pulled the dinosaur book out of his pack and put it back with all the other books. Then he and Annie took one last look around the treehouse. "Goodbye, house," whispered Annie. Jack slung his pack over his shoulders. Annie started down the rope ladder. Jack followed. Seconds later, they hopped onto the ground and started walking out of the woods. "No one's going to believe our story," said Jack. "So let's not tell anyone," said Annie. "Dad won't believe it," said Jack. "He'll say it was a dream," said Annie. "Mom won't believe it," said Jack. "She'll say it was just pretend." "My teacher won't believe it," said Jack. "She'll say you're nuts," Annie said. "We'd better not tell anyone," said Jack. "I already said that," said Annie. Jack sighed. "I think I'm starting not to believe it myself," he said. They left the woods and started up the road toward their house. As they walked past all the houses on their street, the trip to Dinosaur Time did seem more and more like a dream. But this world and this time seemed real. Jack reached into his pocket. He clasped the gold medallion. He felt the engraving of the letter M. It made his fingers tingle. Jack laughed. Suddenly, he felt very happy. He couldn't explain what had happened today, but he knew for sure that their trip in the magic treehouse had been real. Absolutely real. "Tomorrow," Jack said softly, "we'll go back to the woods." "Of course," said Annie. "And we'll climb up to the treehouse," said Jack. "Of course," said Annie. and we'll see what happens next, said Jack. Of course, said Annie. Race you. And they took off together, running for home.